First one that I want to discuss is Tyler Adams potentially making the move to Chelsea, which might seem like his only option now in the Premier League because West Ham have signed Edson Alvarez, the Mexican international from Ajax, for a pretty good price, all things considered, like 35, 40 million. They sold Declan Rice for 104, so they have some cash to splash. And I think Edson Alvarez in some ways, and I went on some, I'm getting into the weeds here on Edson Alvarez, but I know the Hammers fans are pretty happy because he ticks a lot of boxes, maybe a little bit more defensive minded than Alvarez. And some fans seem to think that that's a better fit. And Tyler Adams would fit that mold too. My concern, though, going to Chelsea is a playing time question. He'd be going into a team that's pretty stacked already. And I wonder if that's the hesitation from him personally for wanting to go, because I don't think he'd be the out and out guy like he ended up being with Leeds.
Yeah, it's hard, like right now, Jimmy, put yourself in Tyler Adams' shoes, right? Do you believe if you're Tyler Adams, you're not good enough to play at Chelsea? You don't really let that into your mind, right? Like in terms of being a starter.
Yeah, true.
You're saying this is the next step, and I'm going to go improve myself at that level. We obviously know, there is a delta between what we've seen of him so far, and again, what I think is going to be required to be at a club the size of Chelsea. Having said that, Chelsea are not the size of Chelsea that we expected of Chelsea, and so. I don't think he's there yet, but the reason I say think about it through his lens is that that's a really hard thing to be like, you know what? I'm going to stay in the championship because, I don't think I'll get the playing time that I want at Chelsea. You're like, no, I'm going to Chelsea and I'll figure the rest out later.
Now they're trying to track and maybe even purchase Moises Caicedo. I think they're trying to steal every single player that Brighton ever develops and any manager that Brighton tries to develop too. So I'm surprised that Roberto De Cherbi isn't on their list after Mauricio Pochettino eventually gets sacked from the Blues. But what's interesting is you got Enzo Fernandez, who doesn't do the same things that Tyler Adams does, who's an absolute enforcer. But when you think about them losing Mateo Kovacic to Man City and N'Golo Kante to Saudi Arabia, there seems to be room for him to get in there and to really break things up and to be someone that I think they would end up valuing. And I love that point because if he is him, I love that sentence. If he's the player that you're talking about that really wants to come in and say, I can win this job. And we know that he has that mentality already. He's already shown it in multiple locations and with the national team. Like, I can be this person you can trust. I wonder how long it would take him to win over Pochettino and everybody else. Sure, obviously you're purchasing him, so you know that he's got something that you value. But to go there and actually execute and step up and be the glue, I think he could do it. I actually can envision a world where Tyler Adams is the guy that's keeping Chelsea's midfield together and protecting that back four. I wonder if he's ready for that. And I'm hopeful that Todd Boehly and the ownership for Chelsea, they haven't shown this yet, but that they're going to at some point be content with the players that they have. They're going to allow that to actually flourish and build instead of just continuing to buy players and buy players and buy players and never allowing the team and the manager to establish a rhythm, And I think that lack of harmony was clearly on display for Chelsea last season. And so not to say he didn't come from some chaos at Leeds as well. And that's just the nature of it but Chelsea seems to have enough talent to be like, okay, we're good. Let's let everything just marinate and grow. And if he's a part of that, that could be really special. I could see him at Chelsea for, 5, 6, 7 years, which would be pretty intense. But
yeah, I mean, my issue, the upside is that they've gone in and they've got a lot of young players, right? They've got Andre Santos, they've got Enzo Fernandez, Conor Gallagher plays in the midfield. That's the upside is you're amongst your peers, I think, which feels maybe a little more equal footing than like coming in and thinking that you're going to knock off, one of the veterans that have been at the club that long, that have the experience and tough times that they're always going to go with. Having said that, they have a lot of young, good players in the midfield at Chelsea. So that's a situation where you have to be able to come in and compete. When I think about Enzo and others, Tyler Adams is only going to be as good as the midfield you put around him, right? He's never going to make the game for you. He's never going to be that one, but he's going to be the engine room. He's going to be the one that helps in the press. That's going to be the one that gets you the chance to win the ball higher up the field, that tracks back in a vulnerable situation. All of those little details that you need from a number 6, not going to necessarily play through the lines or make the build-up game. He's got a decent range of passing, but if you put a midfield 2 or 3 around him, then of course I think he can do a fantastic job. But obviously, once you get to that level, it's like you start to look at that list of like, okay, holding midfielder has to have 50 tools, right, that are going to do things for us, or call it 10 for simplicity's sake. Does Tyler Adams have enough of them now to be able to earn enough respect and time on the field to be that guy? I'm not sure if it's now or if in the next couple of years you see sort of that rise or you see him hit that ceiling.
Yeah, I think the young players are still relatively unproven. So I think he could go in there at the tender age of 25 and put his mark on that. Plus, I think this guy's got the intangibles in spades. He's got presence. He's got gravitas. He's a leader. He wants responsibility, and it's fun to play with those types of players. You and I have both done it, and when you're around someone that has that type of mentality, it makes the game easier for everybody around them because they're willing to do the dirty work. I can't say enough about those types of players. Plus, you need some balance, right? We talk a lot about management and building teams, and having someone like him that's so good at what he does. Now, what I love about N'Golo Kanté, just as a compare and contrast, N'Golo Kanté, when you started to watch him play a little bit more, maybe at Leicester City when they won the league, he did less of this in terms of the transition game. He did some, but he really sat in that holding midfield spot and made the game easier for everybody else. I don't remember him making the same types of runs. When he came to Chelsea, he seemed to be asked to do a little bit more, almost play more of an 8 than a 6. And he could do it, whereas I don't think Tyler could transition into that. And I thought that N'Golo Kanté, that's what really made him special, because he had that in his bag. But I do think there's some value, and I think he would be a nice contrast to some of the other players around him, maybe some of the luxury players, as we like to say. I do want to go, before we move on to the next one, Matt Turner, I do want to say that Tyler Adams only having a £20 million release clause in his contract is absolutely criminal. What was Leeds doing? Only $20 million to unlock that guy to go? Maybe it was only $20 million because they got relegated, and maybe it would have been more if they'd stayed in the Premier League. But still, $20 million is pretty criminal to allow a player of his quality just to almost walk away, not for free, but it almost feels like it given today's market, Heath.
Yeah, how much did they pay for him? I can't remember now, but either way,
go ahead.
It's a really low number to let him go, but it's essentially why you create those clauses, right? It needs to be a win-win for both the club and him. What you don't want is him to stick around and lose value over time if they get relegated. And I'm assuming they didn't think they would get relegated, right? So
it's $20 million. They were both around. Yeah, it's around the same value. What they paid for him.
So all in all, not a bad business deal. Obviously, the market is out of control when you look at who he would play next to, and Enzo Fernandez, 110 million or whatever he went for to Chelsea. It's a completely different category, but it's good negotiating to get that clause in there. And obviously 20 million probably would have felt like a lot if Tyler Adams spent the entire season injured or on the bench or whatever, right? So you look at it now and you're like, maybe there's give or take 10 million in there in terms of his true value. But it's probably the thing that sparked all the interest to say, oh yeah, we could, if you're Chelsea, you're like, we could afford that on a squad player that, we're not taking a flyer on this. We're not taking a huge risk. We're taking a flyer essentially, which probably increases the amount of teams, which leads me to the point that also could get a little scary for Tyler Adams, because maybe a 20 million for a Brighton or somebody else that could take a Tyler Adams on would be more of a strategic investment for his contribution versus the Chelsea, which is like, There's probably not a single player at Chelsea that didn't cost 20 million,
Right. No, that's fair. That's a good point.